was playing air drums there for some reason. And then, because I'm talking to my dad as I'm doing this, but you don't hear the muted original footage. And you pull up the left side of the motherboard, that allows you to pull the right side up, and then there's that one cable there. You got to get off the motherboard. Pull that off, motherboard is free. Now we're able to throw it down there and look to see what's going on with this thing. Take this opportunity to clean it up, get the paintbrush, gets all the dust out. Take a look under that black plastic if you suspect there's any water, moisture, or corrosion under there. Looks okay. Okay, now I'm interested in the power jack. If there's any points on the motherboard where the power jack's not making a connection, or there might be a loose connection. And I believe there is. I'm going to try to get it in focus for the camera. And there's a spot right there at the end of my finger where the positive pin is coming through the motherboard and not making a strong connection to the bottom. So, and these gateways are tricky because there's also a point at the top, and a bad USB port on this one actually, but there's a point at the top of the power jack 2 that needs to be resoldered. And as you can see, the USB port's bad too. So the USB port's damaged. We don't want that to short out. That could cause a power problem as well. So we're going to pull off that USB port. Not even going to try to repair it. It's really loose, and there's definitely damage to the plastic inside the USB port. And they're a little too specialized to do repairs on, so that baby's going to come off. Three of the 4 connections on that USB port were already torn apart, so we just got to get that one last one off and then we'll be okay. He's got a couple other USB ports he could use, and he can always use a USB hub. Just taking the old toothbrush there, again a non-used one if possible, and just making sure there's everything's clean off the motherboard in that spot. There's no short circuit. Nothing was scratched or damaged. And I got the soldering iron out and a little file. And what I'm going to do is scratch a spot on the surface of the motherboard where I'm going to attach some solder and run a wire to the power jack. Basically, I'm going to bypass the original connection the power jack is making with the motherboard and instead replace it with a wire. And again, I use a wire because wire has flexibility, and these power jacks get bumped around a lot. And if you have a brittle connection, it's very likely that brittle connection is going to break if somebody impacts that power jack or somebody trips over the power cord while it's plugged in. So by using a wire, we're going to bypass the original circuitry and use our own method here, which will allow flexibility. And I'm taking a little piece of red wire, stripping off the ends, as you can see there, and then I'm going to attach some solder to each end of that wire. I'm going to solder it to the motherboard and connect it to the power jack. Now in this particular gateway, we have to do this on the bottom and top of the motherboard because there's 2 points of connection. Now you're going to see here this little spot that I filed out once it comes in focus. It's a little tiny spot right above where it says D1 towards the top of that board there. And I picked that spot because if you looked directly to the right of that spot, that is where the power jack, the pin for the power jack, comes through the motherboard. So we know that that's the positive connection on the motherboard. And you can see a little bit where that positive pin is loose, and that's why I'm going to create a little divot right next to that positive pin. I'm going to use a wire, and I'm going to wire the wire directly to the back of the power jack. And that's going to replace the existing technology that's in there, which I think is faulty. This little device I just pulled out that's holding the wire is called helping hands. You should definitely have one of those for your shop. And we're going to pull out the solder here, and we're going to solder some solder to each end of that wire. Now the soldering iron has been plugged in for a while, so it's hot. And we're going to take the soldering iron here and just melt a little bit of solder on each end of that wire. This is the technique I like to do. Like I said, I'm not a soldering professional, but this is what works for me. I like to coat each connection that I'm going to work with some solder, and then afterwards, after I get all the connections set up, I just attach the two connections together, melt the solder together, and it makes a good solid connection. Now I'm taking some